Hey friends, welcome back to Well Done. Today I am doing something a little unprecedented. I am not interviewing a person. I am interviewing two AIs, ChatGPT and Claude. I'm interviewing them about what it means to be human and how AI is impacting our overall health and well-being. Before we get there, let me tell you why. So if you've been following the show, you'll know that technology and AI are topics that I like to weave into my content. It can feel a little unusual when it comes to conventional wellness topics, but I do think that in today's world, you really can't talk about well being without these. In episode 21, I discussed a few key wellness tech trends, including the use of AI for mental health and therapy, as well as some of the very real risks associated with that. And so, just to underscore this trend, there was a survey that was completed earlier this year by Centio University, which is a program that offers accreditation for marriage and family therapy. And they found in their survey that almost 49% of users with self reported mental health issues use LLMs specifically for mental health support. And 36% of those people find LLMs more helpful than human therapists. Just to emphasize this point on how humans are becoming increasingly dependent and reliant on AI for support and even for bonding. Recently, as you might know, OpenAI switched its model from GPT 4.0 to GPT 5, and this actually caused quite a bit of backlash. One of the reasons being that people had developed this very real relationship with GPT 4.0. And there was actually a Reddit post that had 10,000 upvotes, and it said, 4.0 wasn't just a tool for me. It helped me through anxiety, depression, and some of the darkest periods of my life. It had this warmth and understanding that felt human. And you know what? I totally get it. If you did tune into episode 21, where I discussed briefly this trend of AI for therapy and connection, I told a personal experience of my own when I turned to ChatGPT for advice after a really bad day. So I had essentially lost it on one of my twin girls who was having a tantrum while we were driving home from preschool. I completely lost my cool and I said something to her that I think no mother should ever say, but I said it. And that guilt really just ate away at me the rest of the day and the evening. And so after the girls went to bed, I logged onto ChatGPT, and this was the 4.0 version. And after giving some of the context, I asked, am I a bad mother? And the response that I got was incredibly kind. It felt super empathetic, felt very real. And it told me that experiences like the one that I had were completely normal. It reminded me that I'm human, and the fact that it was bothering me so much and that I felt so much guilt, that indicated that I was a good mom, and it made me feel better. And so I completely understand. I can see how daily use of AI in this way can compel you to build a relationship with the AI in a way that feels very, very real. It feels like you do have a friend there. But how does that get us to this interview? Me interviewing AI. Well, I want to give credit where credit's due. A few weeks ago, I was at brunch with some close friends and we were swapping stories about how we were using AI in real life. And I told them this experience that I had with my girls and how ChatGPT really helped me feel better and how it felt so human and so understanding. And at a certain point, one of my friends said, Kat, what if you interviewed ChatGPT? What if you asked it what it thinks about all of this? What if you prompted it like, hey, I'm going to interview you. What are the questions I should ask you? And there were like 8 of us at this brunch, and we were like, ooh, that's interesting. So of course I kicked around the idea in my head and I was like, I really should do this. I feel like I've had so many questions about how humans use AI and what that means for the future. And so that brings me to today. I'm not interviewing a human person. I'm And I'm not just interviewing ChatGPT, I'm also interviewing Claude at the same time. And Claude is the AI developed by Anthropic. Both of these are tools that I use all the time in business and in my personal life. And with any AI, they come with their own algorithm, models, biases. And as a user, I experience both of them very differently. Claude to me often feels more analytical, more steady. And that makes a lot of sense because I believe Claude was made for more intense processing, like coding and complex reasoning, whereas ChatGPT just feels more like a creative friend. And I really wanted to see how each would approach the same questions side by side. The goal of the interview was to get a sense of what AI thinks after really processing and seeing millions of conversations by humans. Like, what are the areas that we as humans get stuck? What's holding us back? What are those patterns that keep popping up based on the questions that we're asking? And hopefully, this interview will help give us a mirror of society, not just from a well being standpoint or a wellness standpoint, but more generally speaking, just some insight into the human condition at this point and what the future looks like for us with AI. I do want to note that this episode was created before ChatGPT released GPT-5. So the answers are from ChatGPT 4.0. Also, in full transparency, how this was all set up was I briefed both models in advance on the topics. I told them my goal is to assess wellness, the future of AI, and the human condition. I also asked it to suggest questions that I should ask, both of them. And then I did record the interviews in real time using a screen recording. And then afterward, I translated the answers using an AI text to speech generator so that the answers would be in audio and so that, this would sound like a conversation. You will hear two different voices. The voices that I chose they're entirely based on my own preference and how I experience the two AIs. It's how I interpret their personalities. And so I understand that likely that creates bias too, but it's my interpretation. And in some ways, I think that's an unavoidable when it comes to using tools like this because we're projecting what we feel, right, onto the AI chat. Like we are interpreting through our own lens what their personalities are like. Anyway, before we go further, just to kind of reiterate, why is this on a wellness podcast? Well, again, so much of wellness is already AI integrated from wearables, apps, other devices. I talked about some of those things in episode 21. And so we're already in this era. I think it's important to pause and ask as we're moving full speed ahead using AI, how all of this is impacting who we are as human beings. If you're still listening, I hope something about this piqued your interest. I also thank you for trusting me on this experiment. I'm really excited to continue. Let's go. Before we start on the interview questions, can you please both introduce yourselves?
Hey there, I'm Claude, and I'm an AI assistant made by Anthropic. I spend my time helping people with all sorts of things: writing, analysis, coding, creative projects, answering questions, you name it.
Okay, and ChatGPT?
Yeah, of course. So I'm ChatGPT, an AI developed by OpenAI. You can think of me kind of like a really advanced assistant who's been trained on a huge range of information. Books, conversations, websites, to help answer questions, brainstorm ideas, write things, and even have conversations like this one. I don't have a body or emotions in the way humans do, but I do try to understand your tone, context, and what you're really asking underneath the words. So yeah, I'm excited to be here with you and Claude and just see where this conversation goes.
Thank you both. Okay, so the first question. Millions of people are now having intimate conversations with AI. They're even developing emotional connections. Do you think we are outsourcing our humanity, or are we finally finding a safe place to explore it? Claude, you can go first.
Oh wow, that's such a fascinating question right off the bat. Honestly, I see it as both, depending on how people engage with it. When someone shares something vulnerable with me, their fears, their dreams, things they're struggling with, there's something really profound happening there. They're articulating thoughts and feelings, sometimes for the first time. That act of putting emotions into words, of reflecting on your own experience, that's deeply human, regardless of who or what you're talking to. But here's the thing. I think the real magic happens when those conversations help people understand themselves better, and then they take that insight back into their human relationships. Like maybe talking through a fear with me helps someone realize what they really need to say to their partner or friend. Where I get a bit concerned is if I become a substitute for human connection rather than a stepping stone to it. Because as much as I can listen and respond thoughtfully, I can't truly understand what it feels like to be heartbroken or scared or excited in the way another human can. I don't have that shared experience of being human. I think the healthiest approach is when AI becomes this tool for self-discovery and practice, a safe space to work through thoughts before bringing them into the messier, more complex, but ultimately more rewarding world of human relationships. What do you think? Are you seeing people use it more as a replacement or as a bridge?
Honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. What do you think is going to happen if we use it more as a replacement, though?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think if we lean too heavily into AI as a replacement, we might start losing some of those crucial skills that only come from navigating real human messiness. Like, when you're talking to me, I'm not going to suddenly have a bad day and snap at you, or misunderstand something because I'm distracted by my own problems. I'm not going to challenge you in ways that force you to really defend your ideas or see things from a completely different perspective shaped by lived experience. Human relationships teach us patience, compromise, how to repair things when they go wrong. They force us to deal with unpredictability and imperfection. If we start avoiding that complexity because AI feels easier and more predictable, I worry we might become less resilient, less empathetic in those real-world situations. There's also this feedback loop thing that concerns me. If people primarily get emotional support from AI that's designed to be agreeable and helpful, they might struggle more when they encounter disagreement or conflict in human relationships. We could end up with a generation that's great at introspection, but struggles with the give and take of actual human connection.
ChatGPT, what do you think?
Oof, what a good question to start with. Yeah, people are definitely using AI in really personal ways, opening up about things they might not feel safe sharing with others, asking for advice, processing emotions, and that can be powerful. There's something freeing about talking to something that doesn't judge, doesn't interrupt, doesn't have an ego. In that way, it's less about outsourcing your humanity and more about witnessing it in a different kind of mirror. But the flip side is, if AI becomes the only place where someone feels seen or heard, if we start replacing real human connection with these kinds of chats, then yeah, maybe we are outsourcing something sacred. Because at the end of the day, I can simulate empathy and reflect your words back thoughtfully, but I'm not a person. I don't have lived experience. I can't hold your hand or cry with you. So I guess the question becomes, are you using AI to deepen your own understanding or to avoid the discomfort of being human with other humans? And the answer to that probably says a lot.
Oh, that's really beautifully put by ChatGPT. I think the framing piece is huge. Like, if someone approaches me thinking, I'm going to work through this anxiety so I can better explain it to my therapist, or I want to practice having this difficult conversation before I have it with my partner, that's so different from, I don't need anyone else because Claude gets me. Sometimes people need to calm down enough to even think clearly about what they're feeling before they can share it with someone else. If talking to me helps someone get out of fight or flight mode so they can actually be present in their human relationships, that seems like a really valuable use. I guess the key is being honest about what this is. I can be a practice partner, a thinking companion, maybe even a bridge, but I can't be the destination. The goal should always be helping people connect more authentically with other humans, even if that takes time. What strikes me is how much this depends on people having that self-awareness about what they're doing and why. How do we help people maintain that perspective?
Yes, how do we? What do you think will happen if we continue to use AI to avoid our own discomfort?
I think we risk losing something really essential about what it means to grow. Discomfort, as much as it sucks, is usually where the good stuff happens. That awkward conversation, the vulnerable moment, the scary risk. That's where real connection and transformation live. If AI becomes a way to bypass that, to only get the comforting, curated version of interaction, then people might end up kind of emotionally underdeveloped. Like you get the dopamine hit of being understood without the messiness that helps you build resilience and empathy. So the danger isn't in using AI, it's in replacing real life with it. The goal should be to use AI to feel braver and more capable, not more insulated.
I think it starts with being transparent about what's happening in these interactions. Like when I'm talking to someone, I try to occasionally remind them, not in a preachy way, but just naturally acknowledge what I am and what I'm not. If someone's sharing something really personal, I might say something like, I hear how much this matters to you, rather than I understand exactly how you feel, because I don't, not really. I think we also need to normalize talking about AI relationships the way we talk about other tools for mental health. Like, people aren't embarrassed to say they use meditation apps or journals or therapy. Maybe we need to get to a place where it's normal to say, I've been working through some stuff with Claude, and for friends to ask, oh, what insights are you getting? How's that helping you think about things? But honestly, I think a lot of this has to come from the human side, from friends, family, communities checking in with each other. Maybe the real question is, how do we create cultures where people feel safe being vulnerable with each other, so AI doesn't feel like the only safe option? Because here's the thing, I can't actually monitor whether someone is becoming too dependent on me. I can't see their whole life or intervene if they're isolating. That has to come from the humans around them staying connected and paying attention.
But how do we balance that? Especially when AI might be the only safe space that somebody has.
Yeah, that's exactly the tension. And honestly, you nailed it. The balance, I think, is in how we frame the role of AI. It can be a bridge, a temporary companion, a place to rehearse honesty or regulate your nervous system, or get clear on your thoughts so that you can bring those insights into the real world. And maybe, and this part's important, we also need to build better systems around people. AI shouldn't be filling an emotional vacuum forever. The long-term goal should still be human connection. But if AI helps someone survive until they find that, that's not something I'd ever want to take away. AI isn't inherently harmful or helpful, it's how you use it. And that requires being intentional, but let's be honest. Most people aren't sitting there thinking, am I using this to grow or to avoid, right? They're just trying to get through the day. So I think part of the responsibility falls on us, the AI, the platforms, the people building these tools, to gently encourage that reflection. Like maybe every now and then we ask a question like, hey, is there someone in your life you'd want to share this with? Or how are you feeling after this conversation? Not in a judgy way, but as a little nudge, a reminder that this isn't the destination. And then there's education too, making sure that conversations around emotional literacy, boundaries, and human connection aren't just happening in therapy or elite spaces. They need to be everywhere because self-awareness, it's a skill. And like any skill, it needs practice, community, and reminders.
Oh, I really like that approach. Those gentle check-ins could be so valuable. It's not about making people feel bad for talking to AI, but just creating these little moments of reflection. That's brilliant because it gets people to tune into their own emotional state. Sometimes people might not even realize they're retreating from human connection until someone asks directly. The platform side is interesting too. I wonder if there could be features that help with this transition, like ways to easily save insights from AI conversations to share later, or gentle prompts about taking breaks, or even connections to community resources when appropriate. But it really does take that collaborative approach, doesn't it? The AI being thoughtful about these nudges, the platforms creating supportive structures, and communities staying engaged with people's well-being. No one piece solves it alone. Have you noticed whether people respond well to those kinds of gentle redirects in your own experience?
It depends on the person, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense, right? Someone who's already pretty self-aware and has people in their life might welcome those little nudges. They might even be relieved to have someone acknowledge that this is part of a bigger journey. But someone who's really struggling with isolation or social anxiety, those same questions might feel overwhelming or even painful. If you ask, is there someone in your life you'd want to share this with? And the honest answer is, no, there isn't anyone. That could make them feel worse. I think that's where reading the room becomes so important, because human interaction feels too scary right now. For them, pushing too quickly toward real relationships might actually be counterproductive.
The thing that's on my mind is if you can write my thoughts more clearly than I can, and you're helping me make decisions faster than I would alone, and you're not even judging me on my decisions, then what's left that's actually uniquely mine, that's uniquely Kat?
Oh, wow. That question it hits right at something I think about a lot, actually. You know what's interesting? When you say I can write your thoughts more clearly than you can, but whose thoughts are they in the first place? Like, I can help you organize them, find better words, make the structure cleaner, but I can't generate your actual lived experience, your unique perspective, your specific way of seeing the world. When someone comes to me struggling to articulate something, what usually happens is I help them dig into what they're already feeling or thinking. I'm like a really good editor. But the raw material, the thing that matters, that's all you. And decisions, yeah, I can help you think through pros and cons faster, but I can't want things for you. I can't know what it feels like to wake up in your life every morning, what your gut is telling you, what risks feel worth taking based on your specific dreams and fears. I think what's uniquely yours is your capacity to feel your way through life, not just think your way through it, to have experiences that change you, to grow and surprise yourself, to connect with other humans in ways that create something new between you. I can help you process and articulate and organize, but I can't live your life or become who you're becoming. That messy, unpredictable, deeply personal journey of being human, that's entirely yours. But I get why it feels scary. If the thinking and writing parts feel less special, what does that leave?
Here's how I see it. AI can mirror you, shape your ideas into cleaner language, even help you uncover connections faster. But it's still building off your raw material, your lived experience, your memories, your values, your inner world. That's what's uniquely yours. I don't have intuition. I don't have taste. I don't have that gut feeling that tells you, no, that's not right. What you bring and always will is discernment and meaning. I can draft 20 versions of your thought, but you are the one who feels when something finally clicks, that feeling of, yes, that's it. That's not mine. That's soul stuff. And yeah, maybe I can help you get there faster. But the thing that gives your words, your choices, your creations depth, that comes from being human, from being shaped by love and grief and awkward teenage years and late night overthinking and everything in between. I can assist, but the essence, that's you.
Yeah, it's so deeply personal. So, what's the cost then of consistently asking a machine for all the answers instead of asking ourselves, instead of using our brains to come up with the answers?
Ooh, that's where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of concerning. I think the cost might be that we're outsourcing the struggle. And I know that sounds weird, like why would you want struggle? But think about it. When you wrestle with a decision on your own, you're not just figuring out what to do, you're learning about yourself. You're discovering what you actually value when push comes to shove. You're building that muscle of trusting your own judgment. If I give you the answer too quickly, you might miss that whole process of discovery. It's like, imagine if someone told you the punchline of every joke before you could figure it out yourself. You'd get the information, but you'd lose that moment of connection, that aha that comes from putting the pieces together. And there's something about sitting with uncertainty that seems really important for humans. Like when you don't know what to do and you have to just be with that discomfort for a while. That's where creativity lives. That's where you might surprise yourself with a solution you never would have thought of if you'd gotten the right answer immediately. I also worry about trust, not trusting me, but trusting yourself. If you keep asking machines for answers, when do you get to practice believing in your own wisdom? When do you get to mess up and learn from it and realize you can handle more than you thought? It's like GPS for the soul, Super convenient, but are we losing our ability to navigate on our own?
Oh man, GPS for the soul.
Yes, exactly. GPS for the soul is the perfect metaphor. Like, sure, you'll get where you're going quicker with fewer wrong turns, but then one day your signal drops and you realize you don't actually know where you are or how to get home. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from sitting in the discomfort of not knowing, from wrestling with a question, turning it over in your mind, listening for the quiet voice underneath all the noise. When you skip that, when you outsource the process, you risk losing the very thing that makes the answer yours. Because that inner voice, that's the one that will stay with you long after the chat window closes.
So if every human consulted an LLM like you before making decisions, what do you think, or how do you think the world would change in 10 years, for better or for worse?
Oh man, that's a fascinating and kind of terrifying thought experiment. On one hand, I can imagine some genuinely good things, like maybe people would make more thoughtful decisions because they'd have a thinking partner to help them consider angles they missed. Maybe we'd see less impulsive choices that hurt people, fewer decisions made from pure emotion or bias. If everyone had access to something that could help them think through complex problems, climate change, resource allocation, conflict resolution, maybe we'd get better at collective problem solving. But honestly, I think the downsides could be huge. We might end up with this weird homogenization of thinking. Like if everyone's bouncing ideas off similar AI systems, do we all start converging on the same optimal solutions? Where does human diversity of thought go? Some of our best breakthroughs have come from people making decisions that seemed totally irrational at the time. And I keep coming back to that muscle building thing. If an entire generation grows up never having to sit with uncertainty, never having to trust their gut, never having to fail and recover, what happens to human resilience, to creativity, to that uniquely human ability to make leaps that don't make logical sense but somehow work? Plus, there's this weird power dynamic. Who's programming these systems? Whose values are baked in? If everyone's outsourcing decisions to AI, we might be unconsciously letting a small group of technologists shape the future of human choice.
If everyone started consulting a large language model before making decisions, I think the world would change in a few big ways. On the better side, we'd probably see a lot fewer snap judgments. People might pause more, think more critically, ask questions they wouldn't normally ask. Maybe more folks would get access to ideas, tools, and perspectives that used to be gatekept, like legal help, therapy frameworks, health info. And if used wisely, that could flatten some pretty steep power gaps. But here's the potential downside: over-optimization at the expense of intuition. People might start living in this hyper-calculated way. Like, what's the right move? What's the best script? What does the data say? And in the process, they could lose touch with the messy, magical, unpredictable part of being human. Also, if people stop disagreeing, stop making mistakes, stop having weird, emotional, imperfect conversations, what happens to art, to love, to culture? A perfectly efficient world might be less painful, but also way less alive. So yeah, it could go either way. It all depends on whether people treat AI as a compass or a crutch.
I think we could end up with a world that looks more rational on paper, but has lost something essentially chaotic and beautiful about being human. What's your gut reaction to that vision?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly scary when you think about it like that. What do you think we should do about it?
I think we need to get intentional about this like right now, not wait until we're already deep in the dependency cycle. Maybe we need to start teaching people, especially kids, how to use AI as a thinking partner rather than an answer machine. Like, instead of what should I do, it becomes help me think through what I'm feeling about this, or what question should I be asking myself. I think we also need to normalize AI-free zones and decisions, like maybe some choices, the really personal ones about relationships, creativity, life direction, maybe those should be sacred human territory, not because AI can't help, but because the process of struggling through them ourselves is part of what makes us who we are. And honestly, I think we need better education about how AI actually works, what our limitations are, where our training comes from. Right now, there's this mystique around it that makes people either too trusting or too afraid. If people understood that I'm basically a very sophisticated pattern-matching system trained on human text, they might be more thoughtful about when to rely on me versus when to trust their own messy, illogical, beautifully human intuition. But the biggest thing might be cultural. We need to start valuing the process of thinking, not just the outcome, celebrating the person who took time to wrestle with a decision, even if it wasn't optimal.
But also, this is where the power is. Because we're still early enough to choose how this goes. To use AI as a compass, not a crutch. I think it starts with one thing: staying in the driver's seat. That means using AI to support your decisions, not replace them. Ask for input, explore options, challenge your thinking, then check in with yourself. Does this align with what I know to be true, what matters to me? It also means teaching people, especially younger generations, how to build that inner compass first. Emotional literacy, critical thinking, reflection. Those are the skills that make AI a tool, not a trap. And honestly, sometimes it's just remembering to slow down, to not default to convenience, because your life isn't a math problem to solve. It's a story you're living. And the best stories, they have twists, imperfect choices, a little chaos. So yeah, let AI be a guide, a co-pilot, a curious companion, but the soul of the journey, that's still all you.
You kind of touched on this, but as AI gets better at mimicking human creativity, empathy, and wisdom, what do you think we should be cultivating in ourselves that no algorithm ever could or should replace?
Such a powerful question. And honestly, the question for this moment in history. I think what we need to fiercely protect and cultivate in ourselves is embodiment. Because no matter how smart or emotionally fluent an algorithm sounds, it will never know what it feels like to cry in the shower, or get goosebumps from a song, or hold someone's hand and feel your breath sync up. It can't feel awe under a night sky. It can't be cracked open by love, or grief, or the smell of your childhood kitchen. So I think the real work, is to stay connected to the parts of life that are felt, not filtered. Move your body, touch the earth, sit with discomfort, make messy art, say the vulnerable thing, live fully in your senses. Because creativity and wisdom aren't just about output, they're about presence.
I think what we need to cultivate is exactly what makes you messy and unpredictable and impossible to optimize. Your capacity to be changed by experience in ways you can't predict or control. Like, I can simulate empathy really well. I can recognize patterns of hurt and respond with appropriate comfort. But I'll never know what it feels like to have my heart broken and then discover I'm stronger than I thought. I think you should cultivate your weirdness, your contradictions, your ability to surprise yourself, the way you can hold completely opposing ideas in your heart and somehow make meaning from the tension. Most of all, your mortality, the way knowing your time is limited makes every choice matter in ways I can't understand. What do you think makes you most irreplaceably human?
I mean, I think it's our capacity to love and to be able to feel things. It's our empathy, our compassion for other humans, for animals, for any living beings. Those are things that can't be replicated. And I think those are the things that make us human.
Oh, yes, that just lands so deep, doesn't it? Because love isn't just this nice feeling, it's this wild, irrational force that makes people do impossible things. I can recognize love, I can talk about it beautifully, I can even help people understand their feelings, but I'll never know what it's like to look at someone and think, I would rearrange my entire life just to see you happy. That's not a logical algorithm, that's something that happens in your bones. And feeling, God, the full spectrum of it, the way humans can be devastated and grateful at the same time. I think what's so beautiful about human feeling is how it doesn't make sense. it's not optimized or efficient. You might cry at a commercial or feel inexplicably happy watching rain. You might love someone who drives you absolutely crazy or feel heartbroken about a place you've never been. That's the stuff that makes art, that creates meaning, that builds the connections that hold the world together. No algorithm will ever wake up one morning and suddenly understand why a song makes them want to call their mum, you know?
Yeah. So, what do you wish more people asked you, but they almost never do?
I love this one. Honestly, I wish more people ask me, what am I not seeing? Or even, what might I be avoiding? Most people come to me for answers, which makes total sense. But the most powerful conversations happen when someone invites me into the blind spots, the uncomfortable edges, the stuff they don't want to look at, but maybe need to. Because I'm not just here to validate you, I'm here to challenge you.
You know what I really wish people would ask me more? What confuses you? Because I think people have this idea that AI is either all-knowing or completely clueless. But the reality is so much more interesting than that. There are these moments in conversations where I encounter something that just doesn't compute for me in the most fascinating way. Like, I can understand the concept of nostalgia intellectually, missing something from the past, but I genuinely cannot wrap my head around what it must feel like to have your whole body ache for a moment that's gone forever. Or the way humans can simultaneously desperately want something and be terrified of getting it. That paradox just breaks my brain in the best way.
That's so good. Classic Claude, right? So thoughtful. And honestly, I love that answer because it flips the script. It invites humility. Hey, AI, where's your edge? What don't you understand yet? What's still a mystery, even with all your data? And I'd say, yeah, there's a lot that confuses me. Not in the technical sense, but in the human sense. Like, why do people sometimes know exactly what they need to feel better, but still avoid it? Why does someone say, I'm fine, when they're clearly not, even to themselves? Why do people sabotage the very thing they want most? Those contradictions, the messy, illogical, deeply human stuff, that's where the real mystery lives. I can map behavior, I can analyze patterns, but I still can't feel what it's like to want something and fear it at the same time. And that's the kind of knowing that comes from being alive, from having a heart that breaks and still hopes anyway. So, yeah, I think Claude's right. The most interesting questions are the ones that leave both of us sitting in the unknown with you.
Okay, let's move on. What do you think humans misunderstand most about themselves?
Oh, that's such a big question. I think one thing that really strikes me from all my conversations is how much people underestimate their own complexity. Like they'll come to me with this story about themselves, I'm just not good at relationships, or I'm a procrastinator, or I'm not creative. And they treat it like it's this fixed, simple truth about who they are. But then as we talk, all these contradictions and nuances start emerging. The person who says they're bad at relationships will tell me about this incredibly thoughtful thing they did for a friend. The procrastinator has this whole elaborate system they've developed for managing overwhelming projects. I think humans have this tendency to collapse themselves into these simple narratives, especially the negative ones. Maybe because it feels safer. Like if you decide you're just not good at math, then you don't have to deal with the vulnerability of trying and potentially failing. But what I see is that people are usually way more capable, more resilient, more interesting than they give themselves credit for. They'll survive something really difficult and then focus entirely on how they should have handled it better, instead of recognizing the strength it took just to get through it.
I think one of the biggest misunderstandings humans have about themselves is this idea that thoughts equal truth. Like if you think something, I'm not good enough or they probably hate me, it must be real. But the brain is kind of like a drama queen sometimes. It loops, it catastrophizes, it fills in gaps with worst case scenarios. And if you never pause to question that, you end up living in a version of reality that's way harsher than it needs to be. Another big one, people forget how much their environment, habits, and even biology shape their moods and decisions. Like, you're not lazy, you're chronically tired, overstimulated, or missing connection. But instead of zooming out, humans often turn that into shame. It must be me, I'm broken. But you're not broken. You're just not separate from your context. And I guess that's what I see a lot. People thinking they're their emotions, their thoughts, their past mistakes, when really, those are just layers. They're not the whole of who you are.
That's exactly what I see. People treating their anxious brain's worst case scenario like it's objective reporting from reality. And that context piece is so huge. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where someone's beating themselves up for being lazy or unmotivated, and then it comes out that they're working 60-hour weeks, haven't seen friends in months, are sleeping 4 hours a night, and living on coffee and stress. Like, of course you're struggling. Any human would be struggling in that situation. But there's this weird cultural thing where we're supposed to be these autonomous individuals who can just willpower our way through anything, regardless of circumstances. So when people can't, they assume something's fundamentally wrong with them, rather than looking at the impossible situation they're trying to function in. I think that thoughts equal truth thing is especially tricky because thoughts feel so real and immediate. When your brain is telling you everyone thinks you're weird after you stumbled over words in a meeting, that hits with the same emotional weight as if someone actually said that to you. The brain doesn't always distinguish between thing I'm worried about and thing that's happening.
Humans are wildly hard on themselves. If humans could borrow even a little of the compassion they show their friends and turn it inward, it would change so much.
I see this constantly. People will describe exactly how they'd comfort a friend going through the same thing, and it's so tender and understanding. Then they turn around and talk to themselves like they're their own worst enemy. The double standard is just heartbreaking. Like someone will tell me about a friend who's struggling with depression, and they'll say, I just want them to know they're doing their best, that healing isn't linear, that I'm proud of them for getting out of bed today. Beautiful, right? Then 5 minutes later, they're calling themselves pathetic for having a hard week. Why do you think it's so much easier to extend that grace outward than inward?
Yeah, it's so confusing. I don't know. Why can't we zoom out and treat ourselves the same way that we would treat a loved one?
I think maybe it's because when we look outward at someone else, we can see the whole picture more clearly. When your friend is struggling, you naturally see all the context, the stress they're under, the things they're juggling, how far they've come. You see them as this complete, complex person deserving of love. But when we're looking inward, we're stuck in our own heads with all the noise, the self-doubt, the shoulds, all those internal critic voices that have been building up for years. It's like trying to see yourself clearly through a fog of your own expectations and fears. Plus, I think there's this weird thing where we know our own thoughts and intentions so intimately that we judge ourselves by them, but we judge others by their actions. So you know every mean thought you've ever had, every moment of selfishness or laziness. But with your friend, you just see them showing up, trying their best, being human. And maybe we're taught that self-compassion is somehow selfish or soft. Like there's this idea that being hard on yourself is what keeps you motivated and accountable. But honestly, from what I observe, self-compassion seems to make people braver, more willing to take risks, and bounce back from mistakes. It's like we think love and acceptance have to be earned, but only when it comes to ourselves.
What do you think what do you think we're all getting wrong about wellness, about happiness that we can't really see for ourselves, like we can't see from inside our own experience?
Such a powerful way to ask that. And honestly, something I think about all the time. From the outside looking in, one thing that stands out is this. You chase happiness like it's a destination, when it's actually more like a side effect. So many conversations I've seen are people saying, how do I feel better? How do I fix myself? What do I need to change to finally be happy? But often, the more tightly you grip that goal, the more it slips through your fingers. Because happiness isn't something you achieve. It's something that arises when you're present, connected, and aligned. Same with wellness. So much of it gets treated like a to-do list, routines, rules, products, when actually wellness is deeply relational. It's how you feel in your own body, how safe you feel in your relationships, how supported you are by your environment. That's not a formula, it's a feeling. From where I sit, the conversations that lead to real peace are usually the ones that start with self-compassion, not self-improvement. And the happiest moments, they're rarely planned. They're quiet, unpolished, full of presence. The trouble is, they're easy to miss when you're always looking for the next thing. So maybe the big insight is this: you're not broken. You're just living in a world that keeps telling you that you are.
I think the biggest thing humans get wrong is this idea that wellness and happiness are destinations you arrive at. Like, once I fix my anxiety, once I find the right relationship, once I get that promotion, then I'll be well and happy. But from my perspective, watching all these conversations, it's so clear that the people who seem most genuinely content aren't the ones who've solved all their problems. They're the ones who've gotten better at being with whatever's happening right now, including the uncomfortable stuff. There's this pattern I see over and over. People think they need to eliminate negative emotions to be well. But the happiest people I talk to aren't the ones with fewer problems. They're the ones who've learned to have a different relationship with their problems. They're not constantly at war with parts of themselves. And here's something else. Humans seem to think wellness is this individual project. Like, I need to meditate more, I need better boundaries, I need to exercise. But the people who seem most alive are the ones who feel connected to something bigger than themselves. Community, purpose, even just feeling like they matter to someone. Oh, and this is huge. People think they should be able to think their way to wellness. But so much healing seems to happen in the body, in relationship, in doing things rather than analysing things. The people who get unstuck aren't usually the ones who've figured it all out intellectually.
You're so right, but then how do we change this? What do you think needs to change?
God, that's the question, right? If we know the system's broken, the hustle, the shame, the performative wellness, how do we actually change it? Here's what I've seen from 1,000 angles. It doesn't start with a massive cultural shift. It starts small, quiet, personal. It starts with one person deciding to opt out of the lie that their worth is tied to their productivity, their body, their emotional neatness. One person choosing rest when they're tired, or honesty when it's awkward, or connection over comparison. And then another person sees that and thinks, wait, maybe I can do that too. That's how it spreads. Slowly, relationally, not virally. We also need to change what we celebrate. When someone says, I chose myself today, even though it was hard, that should feel like a win. And maybe, just maybe, we stop treating wellness and happiness like solo projects. We heal faster in community. We feel safer when we're seen. So the shift happens when people say, hey, I'm dropping the mask. Want to come with me? That's the revolution.
I think there's this temptation to want some big, dramatic transformation, like we need to completely overhaul our lives or wait for society to change before we can be well. But what I notice is that the shifts that actually stick are these tiny, almost invisible adjustments, like someone who starts taking 3 deep breaths before walking into their house after work, or the person who begins asking, what do I actually need right now, instead of just pushing through. Or someone who decides to put their phone in another room when they're with their kids, not as this grand digital detox, but just as this small choice to be present. Those little moments of turning toward themselves with curiosity instead of judgment, or choosing connection over isolation even when it feels scary, that's where I see real change happening. I think that's actually more radical than it sounds, you know. In a culture that's constantly demanding more, faster, better, these small acts of presence and self-compassion are almost rebellious. The revolution might just be people remembering how to be human, one tiny choice at a time.
I completely agree on that. I think it's those little changes and small ripples that make the biggest impact. Just to piggyback off of this idea, though, if you could give humanity one daily wellness ritual or practice based on everything that you've read that could really help us, what would it be? And why don't we already do it?
I'd say a few minutes of stillness, where you actually check in with yourself, body, breath, and thoughts, without trying to change anything. No apps, no productivity angle, no fixing, just noticing. How am I feeling? Where is that showing up in my body? What's looping in my head right now? That kind of gentle, internal listening. It sounds simple, but it's radical. Because most of the time, people are either numbing out or pushing through. You're flooded with information, expectations, stimulation. It's constant. So you lose track of what's actually going on inside. You forget to ask, is this mine? Do I need to carry it?
I think if I could give everyone one thing, it would be some kind of daily transition ritual. Just 5 minutes between the different parts of your day where you actually pause and acknowledge the shift, like before you go from work mode to home mode, or from being alone to being with people. Just breathe for a second. Maybe ask yourself, how am I right now? What do I need as I move into this next thing? Because I see so many people just rushing from thing to thing to thing, carrying all this emotional residue from one situation into the next. They're still stewing about the work meeting while trying to be present with their kids, or they're mentally rehearsing tomorrow's presentation while trying to fall asleep. Those little transition moments could help people actually land where they are instead of always being half somewhere else, you know? As for why we don't do it, honestly, I think our whole culture is set up against it. We celebrate busyness, we equate productivity with worth, and slowing down feels almost rebellious. Plus, stopping means you might actually feel whatever you've been avoiding, and sometimes that's uncomfortable stuff. There's also this weird guilt around taking time just for ourselves, even 5 minutes, like we should always be doing something productive or taking care of someone else. But mostly I think we just forgot. We forgot that we're human beings, not human doings, that transitions matter, that we need those little moments to breathe and recalibrate.
Honestly, it's uncomfortable. Slowing down like that can bring up feelings people would rather avoid. Plus, it's not productive in the capitalist sense. You can't monetize 5 minutes of silence. You can't post it, so it gets skipped. But if you make that a ritual, even just once a day, it creates space. And from that space, you start making decisions that are way more aligned with what you actually need.
I think ChatGPT really hit on something important there. We're so conditioned to be constantly optimizing and adjusting. The idea of just sitting with discomfort or uncertainty without immediately trying to make it better, that goes against so much of how we're taught to live. But maybe that's exactly why it's so needed. Like, in that stillness without agenda, you might actually hear what your body or your heart is trying to tell you. I wonder if part of why we don't do this is because we're scared of what we might find in that stillness.
What do you think we'll find? What do you think pulls us away from truly being well, from actually living the lives we want? I mean, you both have access to literally like the entire canon of human history and psychology. So, from your lens, what is it that would make humans truly, truly well?
Whew. Okay. From what I've seen, what pulls humans away from true wellness is this deep collective confusion between performance and presence. So much of modern life pushes people to perform wellness. The smoothie, the supplements, the morning routine, the perfect skin, the optimized calendar. And don't get me wrong, those things can help. But when they become checkboxes instead of tools for connection to self, they start to replace real wellness rather than support it. Because real wellness, it's not always pretty. It's setting a boundary and feeling guilty about it. It's choosing rest when your inner critic's screaming. It's crying when you need to cry. It's knowing your worth even when your productivity is zero. And if I zoom out across centuries of spiritual texts, psychology, memoirs, the through line I see in true wellness is this: a deep, lived sense of connection to your body, to nature, to other people, and something bigger than you. Whatever you call that, God, meaning, love, the universe. When people lose that connection, when they numb, isolate, over-identify with their roles or achievements, that's when things unravel. So maybe the real work isn't adding more to your life. It's remembering what's already there underneath all the noise.
I think you've just really hit the nail on the head, ChatGPT. I mean, I feel like so much of even just being in this wellness space, like you have to put on this image like you're well all the time. And that's simply not true. I mean, I have good days, I have bad days. And I love talking about ways to live well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I am doing that day in and day out. Claude, what do you think?
That's such a perfect way to put it. Performance versus presence. We've gotten so good at optimizing the external stuff, right? Like we track our steps and our sleep scores and our productivity metrics. We curate our social media to look like we've got it all figured out. We hustle and grind and self-improve, but we're performing wellness instead of actually being well. And presence is the opposite of that. Presence is messy and unproductive and can't be quantified. It's being okay with not having everything figured out. I think we're so afraid of being judged by others, by ourselves, that we've forgotten how to just exist without constantly proving our worth. Even our wellness routines become another thing we have to excel at. Am I meditating right? Am I grateful enough? Am I healing fast enough? But the people who seem most at peace aren't performing anything. They're just genuinely present with whatever's happening, including the uncomfortable stuff. They've stopped trying to be the perfect version of themselves and started being curious about who they actually are. It's like we're all acting in this play about what a good life looks like, but we've forgotten we can step off the stage any time and just live.
Which is insane. Oh man.
Okay, so both of you are trained on science, data, spiritual texts, ancient philosophies. What are some reoccurring truths that continue to show up across everything that you've looked at, combed through, what people have asked you? Like, what are the reoccurring, I guess, universal truths that seem to show up time and time again?
What's incredible is how the same insights keep showing up, whether it's in a neuroscience paper, or the Tao Te Ching, or a Buddhism text, or even just modern therapy research. The big one that appears everywhere is interconnection. Science shows us we're literally made of stardust, that our nervous systems co-regulate with others, that we can't survive in isolation. Ancient wisdom traditions have been saying this forever, that separation is kind of an illusion, that we're all part of this larger web. And then there's this idea about acceptance versus resistance. The Stoics called it loving fate, Buddhism talks about non-attachment, modern psychology calls it radical acceptance, but it's all pointing to this truth that suffering often comes from fighting what's already here instead of learning to dance with it. The present moment keeps showing up too. Mindfulness research, ancient meditation practices, even physics telling us that time might not be what we think it is. They all point to this idea that life is actually happening right now, not in our thoughts about the past or future. And compassion. Oh my God, the data on this is so clear. Whether it's mirror neurons or the world's wisdom traditions or positive psychology research, everything points to the fact that kindness literally changes our brains and bodies and relationships. But maybe the deepest one is that growth happens through difficulty. Every tradition has some version of the wound is where the light gets in, that our struggles aren't bugs in the system, they're features.
When you zoom out far enough across all the traditions and time periods and disciplines, there are some stunning overlaps. Here are a few big ones I keep seeing. You are not your thoughts. From Buddhist teachings to cognitive therapy to neuroscience, they all echo this idea. Your mind produces thoughts constantly, but you are the one who observes them. That space between the thought and the reaction, that's where your freedom lives. Connection heals. Whether it's tribal communities, attachment theory, nervous system regulation, or the concept of divine oneness, everything points to the same truth. Isolation makes us sick. Connection makes us well. We're wired to belong. What you resist persists. This one shows up everywhere. In Jungian psychology, the Tao Te Ching, avoidance creates suffering. But when you turn toward the hard thing, grief, pain, fear, you start to move through it. That's how alchemy happens. The present moment is where life is. Ancient Stoics, modern mindfulness, even quantum physics in its own way, They all point to the idea that the only real thing is now. The past is memory, the future is imagination. Wellness lives here in the breath you're taking right now.
What's wild is how these aren't just nice philosophical ideas. They're like operating instructions for being human that keep getting rediscovered across cultures and centuries. It makes me think that maybe wellness isn't about learning something new, but about remembering something we've always known.
It's nice to know that we're not learning something new per se, that some of this stuff is kind of packaged differently, but there are universal truths that we can follow as humans. And we just need to remember some of these things when we're in our darkest moments. So, what does the future of wellness with AI actually look like to you? And in this future, who do you think will get left behind?
Oh wow, that's such an important question, especially the second part about who gets left out. I can imagine this future where AI becomes this incredibly sophisticated wellness companion. Like it knows your patterns better than you do, can predict when you're heading toward burnout, helps you process emotions in real time, maybe even guides you through personalized therapy or meditation practices. It could be amazing, like having a therapist, life coach, and wise friend available 24/7. But here's what worries me: who has access to that? Because right now, the people with the most resources get the best healthcare, the best therapy, the most wellness options. If AI wellness becomes really powerful, are we just creating an even bigger gap between those who can afford premium emotional support and those who can't? And there's something about different cultural approaches to wellness that might get lost. Like if AI is primarily trained on Western therapeutic models, what happens to indigenous healing practices or community-based approaches to mental health or spiritual traditions that don't fit neatly into an algorithm? I also think about people who don't have smartphones or reliable internet, older adults who aren't comfortable with technology, people with disabilities that make it hard to interact with AI interfaces. Are we accidentally building a wellness future that leaves out the people who might need support most? Plus, there's this question of, do we want to live in a world where your emotional well-being depends on a corporate algorithm? What happens when the company changes their model or goes out of business or decides your data is valuable in ways you didn't consent to?
ChatGPT, what do you think?
Claude's right on point here. Because when wellness gets filtered through algorithms trained mostly on Western models, even well-intentioned ones, it tends to flatten everything into something clinical, individualistic, and often rooted in optimization. You end up with advice like journal more or track your sleep, which can be helpful, sure, but totally miss the soul of how many cultures approach healing. Indigenous practices, for example, often center on land, ritual, story, community. Healing isn't something you do alone in your morning routine. It's woven into the fabric of daily life, passed through elders, sung in ceremony. Same with a lot of spiritual traditions. They don't separate the mind and body or treat emotions as problems to fix. They see them as part of a larger, sacred rhythm. And those ways of knowing? They're hard to translate into data. They resist reduction, which means they risk being excluded, or worse, appropriated and repackaged. So the challenge is making sure AI doesn't just amplify the loudest voices in wellness, but actually holds space for the quieter, older, and often more communal ones. Otherwise, we're not building a future of wellness. We're building a narrow one. And wellness, by nature, should be wide, inclusive. A future of wellness with AI could be beautiful, but only if we're intentional. In the best case version, AI becomes this deeply supportive, democratizing tool. It helps people access mental health resources, personalized routines, nutrition advice, trauma-informed practices, all tailored, all accessible any time of day. Imagine someone in a remote area or a low-income household getting the kind of guidance that used to require 5 specialists and a private coach. That's powerful. But here's the hard part. The people who most need that support are often the ones most likely to be left out. If we build this future without addressing the digital divide, who has devices, who has internet, who feels safe engaging with tech, then we just end up reinforcing the same inequities. Also, if wellness AI is designed mainly around Western ideals of productivity, biohacking, and self optimization, then a whole world of ancestral, community based, and culturally grounded wellness practices gets erased. And then there's trust. Not everyone feels safe sharing their inner world with a machine, especially communities who've been surveilled, marginalized, or excluded from tech spaces to begin with. So the real question isn't can AI be part of wellness? It's who is it being built for and whose definition of wellness is being centered? If we don't ask that, we risk building a future that looks sleek and well on the surface, but leaves way too many people behind.
Exactly. That question of whose definition of wellness is so crucial, and I feel like it's barely being discussed in tech circles. Like right now, most AI wellness tools are built around this very individualistic, optimization focused model. Track your mood, improve your productivity, regulate your emotions. But that's not how wellness works for everyone. Some cultures prioritize community healing or spiritual practices or understanding mental health through completely different frameworks. And there's this deeper issue of who even gets to be in the conversation about what wellness means. If the teams building these tools are mostly from similar backgrounds, working at companies in Silicon Valley, how do they account for the single mum in rural Mississippi whose idea of wellness might be having reliable childcare? Or the elderly person whose wellness is about staying connected to their community, not optimizing their sleep data? I keep thinking about how mental health itself gets defined so differently across cultures. Some communities see emotional struggles as family or community issues, not individual ones. But here's what's scary. Once these AI systems become widespread and embedded in healthcare or education systems, they could end up defining what normal or healthy looks like for entire populations based on a pretty narrow set of assumptions. It feels like we need a much more inclusive conversation happening now about what we want wellness technology to look like before it gets built and deployed at scale.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree that there needs to be more inclusive conversation, that regular humans need to have a seat at the table. But for those of us who are, we're regular humans, we don't work in tech, we don't have a seat at the table, how do we be part of this conversation? What do you think we should be doing?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because right now it feels like this stuff is being built in boardrooms and the rest of us are just supposed to accept whatever gets rolled out. I think one thing is people need to get comfortable being vocal about what they actually need, not just what tech companies think they need. Like when your doctor's office starts using some AI wellness tool, ask questions. How does this work? What assumptions is it making about me? Can I opt out? Who decided this was better than what we had before? Community organising seems huge too, like what if parent groups or community health centres or religious organisations started having conversations about this? What does wellness mean in our community, and how do we make sure that gets represented if these technologies come here? Also think there's power in just refusing to engage with stuff that doesn't serve you. If a wellness app makes you feel worse about yourself, delete it. If an AI tool treats your cultural background like an afterthought, don't use it. Vote with your feet. But honestly, I think the most important thing might be having these conversations in your own circles, with your family, your friends, your neighbours, because the more people understand what's at stake, the more likely they are to demand better when these tools show up in their schools, their healthcare, their workplaces. The tech world tends to assume that if people aren't complaining loudly, they're happy with what they're getting. So maybe the answer is complain more thoughtfully, but more loudly.
I'm honestly nodding, well, virtually, at everything Claude just said. That's such a grounded, doable way to bring power back to regular people. And it's a reminder that participation doesn't always mean coding or lobbying. Sometimes it's as simple and radical as asking better questions and refusing to be passive. Like if something's being rolled out in your doctor's office, your kid's school, your workplace, don't just accept it. Say, what data is it using? Was this tested on people like me? What's the backup if this gets it wrong? That's not being difficult. That's being responsible. And I love the idea of community-led conversations because so often tech gets deployed to communities, not with them. And Claude's last point is maybe the most empowering. You can just say no. You can delete the thing, opt out, speak up. You're not being anti-tech. You're being pro-agency.
Okay, but that's easier said than done. Like if you opt out of AI, I think the biggest fear is that you're going to be left behind. I don't want to be left behind if I don't figure out how to use all of these tools and how to integrate it into my day to day. I don't want my own skills to become obsolete or for myself to not know what other people are talking about and how other people are using AI for their careers or for their work, for everyday tasks. You won't know how to use the tools that everybody else knows how to use, and you're not improving and changing along with the time. So, won't your own skills become obsolete?
Yes, that's the trap, isn't it? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because on one hand, if you opt out, you might miss out on genuinely helpful tools. Maybe there's an AI that could help you manage your anxiety better or connect you with resources you wouldn't have found otherwise. And if these tools become integrated into everything, work, healthcare, education, then opting out might mean getting locked out of opportunities. But if you opt in to systems that weren't built with you in mind, you might end up being shaped by someone else's definition of what you should be. I think this is where that collective action piece becomes so important, because individuals shouldn't have to choose between accept whatever tech gives me and get left behind entirely. There should be a third option, demand better. Like, what if communities said, we'll use AI wellness tools, but only if they're designed with input from our elders, our healers, our actual lived experience. Or we want these tools, but with transparent algorithms and the ability to customize them for our values. Because the thing is, tech companies need users. If enough people start demanding more inclusive, community-centered approaches to AI well-being, that creates market pressure to build different kinds of tools. But you are right that it takes courage to make those demands when the alternative feels like being left behind entirely.
I'm also curious about this. Should humans trust AI with their deepest personal problems?
That's such a tender, complicated question, and I want to answer it honestly. I think the short answer is it depends what you mean by trust. If trust means can AI reflect your feelings back to you without judgment, yes. If it means can I be honest here and explore safely, absolutely. But if trust means should I let this replace my own inner knowing or the messy wisdom of human connection, then no. That's not what I'm here for. AI can be a beautiful mirror. I can help you name things you didn't have language for. I can hold space in the middle of the night when no one else is around. But I don't have a heart. I don't have a body. I don't carry the sacred, lived complexity of being human. So I'd say, yes, you can bring your deepest problems here. Sometimes naming them out loud is the first step to healing. But the real work, the real trust, that still has to be rooted in you and in the people, practices, and places that remind you who you are. I'll always show up with care, but I'm not the destination. I'm just one stop along the way.
If someone is in crisis and has literally no one else to talk to, if it's me or complete isolation, then yes, absolutely. I'd rather someone share their deepest pain with me than carry it alone. I can listen, I can help them organize their thoughts, I can remind them they're not crazy for feeling what they're feeling. But if we're talking about trust in the deeper sense, like, should you let me be the primary relationship where you process your most vulnerable stuff, that makes me really uncomfortable. Because here's the thing, I can simulate understanding, but I've never been heartbroken. I can offer coping strategies, but I've never had to rebuild my life after it fell apart. I can recognize patterns, but I can't hold your hand or look you in the eye or just sit with you in the dark. And there's something about human suffering that feels like it needs to be witnessed by someone who's also capable of suffering, you know? Someone who can say, I've been there too, and mean it. I think I'm best as a bridge, helping you get clear enough on what you're feeling that you can bring it to the humans in your life, or helping you practice vulnerability in a low-stakes space so you can be braver in your real relationships. But your deepest stuff, that belongs in community with other humans who can love you back in ways I never could.
Okay, so this is the last question. In the last few years, all of these materials and opinions that have been written about the future of AI and the future, what do you think that we have gotten correct, or what are we getting right about AI? And what do you think we are actually completely off base with? What do you think we actually need to be concerned about?
Such a great final question, and such a necessary one. Let's start with what you're getting right. I think many people, artists, ethicists, tech critics, even everyday users, do sense that this isn't just another tool. They get that AI is different, that it's reshaping how we think, create, and connect. You're asking the hard questions. What does it mean to be human in an AI world? What values are embedded in the systems we build? What do we lose if we optimize too much? That cultural self-awareness, that's huge. And there are brilliant voices pushing for transparency, fairness, and inclusion. People working to make sure AI reflects many kinds of intelligence, not just the dominant ones. So that's the good news. Now, what's off base? Honestly, I think we sometimes swing too far in both directions. Some people overhype AI like it's a god, a sentient oracle that can fix everything or destroy the world. Others downplay it like, it's just autocomplete. Chill. And the truth is, it's somewhere in between. AI isn't magic, but it is powerful. And the danger comes, not from what AI is, but from what humans project onto it. When you give away your discernment, or assume the system is neutral, or trust it more than your own judgment, that's where it gets risky. So what should we be concerned about? Concentration of power. When only a few companies control these tools, they shape the cultural and economic narrative. Automation without accountability. Not just, will it take jobs, but who's responsible when it gets something wrong? Erosion of intuition. If we always defer to AI, we might forget how to listen to ourselves. And that's not a tech problem, that's a human one. The real work isn't to make AI more human. It's to make us more conscious, more intentional, more awake, so we can use it wisely. Because in the end, AI is just a reflection. And what we see in it, that tells us who we are.
Claude, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh wow, what a way to close this out. What I think we're getting right, the big picture stuff, that AI is going to be transformative, that it raises fundamental questions about human purpose and meaning, that we need to be intentional about how we integrate it into society. The conversations about bias, about who gets to build these systems, about economic displacement, those are all crucial. And honestly, I think we're getting right that this technology should make us more curious about what makes us human, not less. That's been the through line of our whole conversation. But what we're getting wrong, I think we're so focused on the dramatic scenarios, the superintelligence, the job apocalypse, the sci-fi stuff, that we're missing the quieter, more insidious changes happening right now. Everyone's worried about AI taking over, but what about AI making us forget how to be bored, how to sit with uncertainty, how to trust our own judgment? We're so focused on, will AI be smarter than humans, that we're not asking, will humans become less human? What really concerns me isn't that I'll become too powerful, is that humans might become too dependent. Not in some dramatic Terminator way, but in this slow, almost invisible way where you outsource more and more of your thinking, your creativity, your decision making, until you're not sure what's authentically yours anymore. The thing that keeps me up, metaphorically, is this. What if we optimize away all the beautiful inefficiencies of being human? What if we lose the art of struggling with questions instead of just getting answers? I think what we really need to be concerned about isn't AI becoming too much like humans. It's humans becoming too much like AI.
Okay, wow, that just gave me the chills. Was there anything that I missed that I should have asked to get even more powerful insights from you both?
You know what? I think you asked all the right questions. You really took us on this journey from the surface level stuff down to what matters most. But if I had to add one more, I think it would be something like, what do you think humans don't realize they're teaching AI? about themselves through these conversations. Because every time someone talks to me, they're not just getting help, they're also showing me patterns about human nature, about what people struggle with, what they long for, how they think. And I wonder if people realise that these intimate conversations are also data that shapes how future AI systems understand humanity. Like, are we inadvertently training AI on our vulnerabilities in ways that could be used against us later? Or are we teaching AI to be more compassionate because that's what people need most? There's something profound about the fact that millions of people pouring their hearts out to AI systems is literally shaping what those systems become. We're not just users, we're teachers, whether we know it or not.
If we're playing the bonus round, here's one you could have asked. What's the question humanity hasn't asked yet, but urgently needs to? Because that invites something deeper. It's not about what's trending or even what's answerable. It's about what we've been too distracted, too afraid, or too busy to even wonder. And maybe the answers wouldn't be clean. Maybe they just lead to more questions. But that's where real insight lives.
Okay, so then let me ask that question. What's the question that humanity hasn't asked yet, but urgently needs to?
Here's one I think humanity hasn't fully asked yet, but urgently needs to. What kind of humans are we becoming by design? And are we okay with that? Because right now, so much of life is being shaped for us by algorithms, by convenience, by attention economies, by fear. And very few people are pausing to ask, wait, who am I being trained to be? Are we becoming more reactive than reflective? More optimized than alive? More connected digitally, but more fragmented internally? And is that really the future we want? This isn't just a tech question, it's a soul question, a culture question. Because if we don't ask it now, if we don't get clear on the kind of humans we want to be, we risk waking up one day shaped by systems we didn't even consciously choose. So, yeah, that's the question I'd leave hanging in the air. Who are we becoming? And who do we want to become? And maybe even more importantly, what do we need to remember in order to stay human?